so much for having me here today. And I just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you guys about the same things that Linda said. How can we make sure that all of our kids get the opportunity for STEM education? If I ask you what STEM is, almost everybody says science, technology, engineering, math. My dad was the youngest of 19, mom's the oldest of 15. I had 300 first cousins, and when I lived in New York, my students were like, "You're a good Catholic family." I'm like, "No, we were just some good German Lutherans with lots of cotton to pick in the South." But my relatives, my aunts and uncles that are still alive, are in their 80s and 90s. And when I would see them every month or so, they'd say, "Honey, we're praying for you." And I'm like, "Well, thank you, but why?" I thought they were praying because they think Charlotte is too big of a city. It's only 1 million people. For you guys, it's the country, but for them, it's a big city. And they're like, "Oh no, you know, those people, when you're doing stem cell research, people will come protest." And I'm like, "I'm not doing stem cell research." And so I'm sure that most of your people know that that's not what it is, but what it really is very different to different people. What I want to do is I want to show you 4 pictures. These are real kids from outside Philadelphia, middle school kids. 4 different pictures, and I want you to think which one is the most STEM. And so you have to pick one. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about them to begin with. This is picture A. I will tell you a little bit about this one. It's kind of hard to see. They have a net, and there's seining, and there's fish, and other things in there. Okay, so at your table, I want you to turn to somebody next to you or across the table. Tell them which one you picked and why. And you must pick one. So pick one picture. I know it's hard. Pick one. Why is that the most STEM? Well, I can tell you're very passionate. Let's go back and look at these. How many people think picture A is the most STEM? Raise your hand if you think picture A is the most STEM. Okay? This girl is working on this baby doll that she's working on. It cost about $100,000. This is at it's at a university in Philadelphia, and there's somebody in a room kind of behind her that's programming it to do things that a normal kid would do. And so it's the way they train nurses to work on real people without having them work on real babies. How many people thought B? Okay, these kids are at a river, or actually I think they're at the beach. They're seining. How many people thought C? Okay, what these kids are really doing is they were singing a song and acting out a science concept. When I've done this, people say, "Oh, that's that coding without a device." And I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's all kinds of really great activities that teach the thinking that goes in coding. How many people chose D? Okay, this little girl's, there's a 3D printer. Actually, she's just sitting and looking at it. She wasn't really doing much of anything, but it's a 3D printer. A lot of people picked that. So you can see STEM depends on who you ask. In my mind and the way we think in Discovery, they're all STEM. And hopefully you guys, I knew a lot of you guys were thinking that as you were going through it. Because we say STEM is not something you buy. If you go to a science conference or a math conference, the same manipulative boxes that have been out there for 35 years are still there. But now instead of saying math or science, they say STEM. Somebody just changed the name. And the state of Tennessee was one of the first places to get Race to the Top money. The only way to get it was to be a STEM school. So the director who was in charge of STEM in Knoxville came to visit me in Charlotte 5 years ago or so when they were getting ready to get this money. And she realized that every school was just going to change the sign and say they were now STEM school. So her husband formed his own company to make signs, and they became multimillionaires. But not much has changed in the state of Tennessee in terms of school. We also believe that the acronym Science, Technology, Engineering, Math is not big enough. And as I travel the country and the world, like Nebraska is the most unique. Nebraska calls it STEAMY, Science, Technology, Engineering, Agriculture, Math, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. And everybody keeps adding letters. After a while, I'm like, can we just call it school? And so the way we define it at Discovery is students and teachers energizing minds, because we believe that STEM is for all kids, all teachers, pre-K, adult. So students and teachers energizing minds. Students come first, that's what it's all about. But when they get excited about solving a real problem, they excite each other, their teachers, their principals, and their community. And we believe it's for all kids no matter where they live. My last superintendent in Charlotte, first I was in charge of science and was the director of science pre-K-12, then the director of science and math, then the director of STEM. You guys are in schools, you know how it is, they just keep adding other things to your plate. And he would say, it's Cindy Moss, the science boss. She thinks it should be all science all the time. I'm like, yes, I do. And then when they made me STEM, it just became STEM boss. So if you're on Twitter, I'm STEM boss, and so please follow me. But what we're going to talk about the rest of the time is what can you do with STEM?
I can investigate the mysteries of the human body from the inside out.
I can do experiments and learn to think like a scientist.
I can learn biology when I'm still learning English.
I can solve problems that I couldn't understand before.
I can engage.
I can build.
I can achieve.
I can learn.
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 So for me personally, and now Discovery as a company, we believe that STEM is about giving all kids the skills so they can be creative problem solvers and be successful. In our country, we've been talking about the leaky STEM pipeline for a long time. This is from 2008, and you probably can't really see the numbers back there, but these are real numbers. We started with 4 million ninth graders in 2001, 2.8 million graduated high school in 2005. That's a problem we don't talk about. Of the 2.8 million who graduated, 1.9 million got accepted into some kind of college after high school, whether it was 1 year, 2 year, 4 year. Of those 1.9 million, only 1.3 million were able to stay after one semester. So we started with 4 million. We're already down to 1.3 million. They predicted that, I think it's 166,000 would get degrees in STEM. It was less than 120,000. So we've had this leaky STEM pipeline for a while. We also, when we look at the data, while we're sitting here, every 18 seconds a kid's dropping out of high school somewhere in the U.S. And you guys know our English language learners are a big chunk of that because of the problems that they face. When you can find these kids, 84% say it's because they couldn't pass algebra. And you know, as we've ramped up the standards, that it's getting more and more difficult. The National Council for the Teachers of Math say if your high school has an issue with algebra, and they found every high school in the country, including really expensive private schools, had an issue that not all kids were mastering algebra, they say you have to go all the way back to pre-K and kindergarten because we have a cultural issue. When I started my doctoral program in Australia, my professor said, is it socially acceptable in the U.S. to say I don't know how to read? I'm like, no, why? He goes, well, why is it socially acceptable to say I don't do math? We're the only country in the industrialized world that does that, and we have to fix it. It's a cultural issue. There's a study called Ready, Willing, and Unable to Serve. The U.S. Army was having problems getting the caliber of recruits they wanted, so they brought in 1,000 kids from the state of Pennsylvania, kids 18 to 25 who'd graduated, done fine, spent a day with them. They gave them physical fitness tests, writing tests, reading tests, math tests, problem-solving tests, and what they found is 70% of them could not get in the military at the lowest level because of their lack of problem-solving skills. So the U.S. Army has declared the lack of STEM skills a matter of national security. If you look at kids that graduate, last year in May of 2014, 1% of the kids in our country got degrees in science. 1%. When you go to math, it's 0.01%. So when kids ask me what they should major in, I'm like, if you should do math, if you can do math, you should major in math or statistics. On average, a math or statistics graduate has 15 to 20 job offers when they graduate because there's so few of them. I was a teacher for 20 years. This is when I won the Milken National Educator Award. I don't know if you guys have had people at your school win. You don't know about it. Your chancellor, your superintendent nominates you. You don't apply. And we knew something was happening at our school. There's 189 schools in Charlotte. There's never enough people to take care of the grounds. And about 50 people from the facilities department showed up, and they were mowing and planting flowers, and they were painting and scrubbing gum off the floors. So we knew something was happening. And the principal said that our school had won an award, but there was only room in the large gathering space for half the teachers and kids. So he said, teachers who go above and beyond, you'll get invited. So I get this email saying I was invited. Emailed him back right away. I have the most struggling kids I've ever had in biology. We'll take the extra hour and a half to get ready for our state test. And he didn't respond. So the day of the awards, the police officer, we had 3 resource officers in every high school, shows up and he's like, Miss Moss, it's time to go. And I'm like, we're not going. And he puts his hand on his gun. I'm like, okay, just close the door. So I closed the door. I read my kids the riot act. I'm like, you will not embarrass me. You will behave. And so we get there, not only are we there, we're in the front row. So I grabbed the 2 kids I trusted the least and put them on either side of me. So when I found out I was getting a check for $25,000, that's who was there. Besides being a teacher, and I coached cross-country basketball and track, when we lived in Syracuse for 15 years, my husband and I owned a McDonald's. And so I went to Hamburger University, I wrote our business plan, and on the weekends, my students would come through to see Mrs. McMoss serving French fries. Now, running a McDonald's is just like being a high school teacher. It's very much the same thing. But the first thing that I learned is when we hired a new employee, it didn't matter if they were cleaning the bathroom, making French fries, taking orders. We spent more money the first 6 months we hired them in training them than we spent paying them. And it just hit me as a teacher how little we do for us. I mean, in most places you get a day before school starts in August and maybe another day in January or February if you haven't had snow. And in Charlotte, the last 7 years I was in the central office, we got that February day once. So we've set our teachers up for failure, and I made up my mind 25 years ago, if I were ever in charge of teachers, I was going to do whatever they needed, whatever I could to make sure they got what they needed to be successful. I also, as one of those 300 cousins, most of the cousins my age were boys, so I grew up anything they could do, I could do better, or I was going to die trying. So as an educator, I spent a whole lot of time trying to make sure girls understand they can do anything they want to do. You guys know all the research about how girls, we like math and science in elementary school, but by the time we get to middle school, we don't like it, and it just keeps getting worse. I personally believe there's no research. This is just the Cindy Moss observation. I believe it's because we're not showing girls how having science, technology, engineering, and math skills makes the world a better place. As females, we're hardwired to want to make the world a better place. That's why we go into education and medicine. Okay? But if we can show girls what these skills can do for them, they'll go into it. I also think, I travel the world, and there's no place else in the world I want to live than the U.S., but in 2015, women, we still make 77 cents on the dollar compared to men with the same education and experience. And to put it bluntly, that just pisses me off. It's wrong. It's wrong on so many levels. And so we need to tell girls that if they have STEM skills, in STEM jobs we make 95 to 96 cents on the dollar, and companies are searching for females with these STEM skills. So I think we just need to tell them the truth. I also think we need to look at what's going on in the world. You guys know how good the Finland schools are. Everybody's known about them for a long time on the PISA and everything else. Well, they've been number one until the very last time that they took the PISA, they were number two. And you guys know what would happen. If your school had been number one on the state test and now the school next to you beat you, maybe that before you were testing every 4 weeks and now your principal says, well, I think we need to test every week now. That's typically how we respond in the U.S. The Minister of Education called me and wanted to meet. She's like, we need Discovery to come help us figure out how do we make school more fun so our kids will do better. And it's just a very refreshing kind of attitude. They've never spent a single penny in their country on testing. There's no document that compares one school to the next. It's harder to be a teacher than it is to be a doctor. They're the most respected people. Kids start school at 7, but when they start school at 7, there's 15 kids with 3 teachers who stay with them until they're 12. So they just have a totally different attitude. And what they've done now, the OECD just did a test of 30-year-olds all across Europe, and the kids from Finland were head and shoulders above everybody else, and so they know they've done the right thing for the last 20 years. Well, they want to do the right thing going forward. They've thrown out all of their national standards. Starting this fall, there will be no national standards, any grade level, but what they've done is given every grade level 2 big problems to solve. And the teachers in Finland get a month of professional development every summer with their principal. They decide what they need. And so they're going to work this summer to write their lessons around those 2 big problems. And so to me, that tells me that that's the right thing to do. We're doing a lot of work in Thailand. Thailand, when they took the PISA 6 years ago or so, they were the bottom in the world. And they called my professor in Australia and said, who can help us figure out how to give our 15-year-olds the skills they need to do well on the PISA? And he told them to call me, and so we're doing a lot of work with them. But their king, who's almost 90, he wants to do STEM because STEM gives their kids the reason to learn English. And if they can speak English when they graduate, they quadruple their salary. So he wants STEM for economic prosperity. This is Charlotte. You may have seen it from the airport if you've flown through and with US Air and had to stop there, but most people haven't really gone in. We have about 1 million kids, more than 100 countries, more than 100 languages, 60% free and reduced lunch. When I took over science, in a large urban district, you get a new superintendent about every 2 years. And I'm like, okay, I have all these ideas and I want them to stick for my kids, so I need to go to the companies. So I started with the big energy companies. Charlotte would like to be known as the energy capital of the country, although Texas would fight us on that. But these 3 companies, when I went to talk to them, they said, we need 50,000 new employees in the next 5 years. I'm like, okay, does that mean you need 40,000 people with 4-year engineering degrees? And they said, no, we really love 30,000 people with mechatronics degrees. Have you guys heard of mechatronics? Okay, if you have kids of your own, this is something you need to know. It's a 2-year degree, a combination of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and IT. If you have kids who like to play video games and take things apart, this is a really good job for them. It's a 2-year degree, and in Charlotte, in North Carolina, we pay our teachers really badly. A 4-year teacher starts at $28,000. You get this 2-year degree, you start at $75,000. Yeah. And it's all over the country. People in mechatronics can work in advanced manufacturing, they can work in hospitals, they can work in small companies because you know enough mechanical and electrical engineering to fix things, and you know enough of IT to do that end, and you know enough to know if you have to call somebody else. So it's a really great, you can get a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, a master's degree, or a PhD in mechatronics. We also had 22 hospitals, and I taught biology and anatomy. I always would have these kids who wanted to go to medical school, and on bad days I wanted to say, you might go to medical school as a cadaver. But because some of these kids, I just knew they didn't have the work ethic and it was never going to happen. But after I won that Milken National Educator Award, I got to be on the board of the Carolinas College of Health Sciences and found out there are these great jobs. The easiest way to get in the hospital and a good job is to be a surge tech. It's a 10-month program, costs $10,000, but if you speak Spanish or you're African American and had to be in high school, you go free. If you don't fit that category, if you agree to work for one of the 22 hospitals, it only costs $2,000. And what you do is you take a tray, like a McDonald's tray or cafeteria tray, you go to the supply closet, get whatever the surgeon needs, you watch surgery, you make sure they didn't leave anything in, you sign that no instruments were left inside the body, because that'd be bad, and then you put it in the dishwasher. Now remember, my teachers in North Carolina start at $28,000. You start at $55,000 in this job. I was taking my science and math teachers to see this and had to stop because they were leaving to go get this job. And once you get into this job, the hospitals will pay for you to go through anything else. You can go through a 2-year program to be a radiation technician. That starts $75,000, $80,000. And I tell people, if I were going back to school, this is the job I would take, to be an extracorporeal technologist. It's the person who runs the heart and lung machine. It's a 2-year program. They typically like people 30 and above because if you make a mistake, somebody dies, and so they want you to be mature. By federal law, you can only work 12 hours a week. So most people work 2 6-hour days, and the starting salary is $150,000. Yeah. Another thing in Charlotte. You guys can't leave. You're New York City teachers. You're good at what you do. Another big industry in Charlotte is NASCAR. We're the buckle of the Bible Belt and also the buckle of the NASCAR belt. Most jobs in NASCAR require 2 semesters of community college, 2 math and 2 science classes, and start $80,000 to $90,000. Okay, and English language learner kids can do every one of these jobs. We just have to help them understand that. I also joined something called STEM Connector. If you guys haven't joined STEM Connector and you're really interested in it, you just go to stemconnector.org and sign up. You'll get a STEM daily, an email every day. There's 10,000 organizations. Every day they post some kind of new research study, some grant opportunities. There is so much money out there for STEM, particularly STEM and English language learners. So if you can sign up for this, you'll get that information. For you guys in the state of New York, only California is going to have 1.2 million jobs. Texas is going to have 900,000 new STEM jobs. You're going to have almost 500,000 new STEM jobs in New York, and the majority of them are in the city. Okay, so either you figure out how to get your kids ready for these jobs, or other people are going to come take them because they're really good jobs. And the jobs are not what people think they are. Engineering is only 16%. I know kids who graduated from Virginia Tech, Duke, Georgia Tech, good engineering schools last year, or like in 2014, and they can't get jobs because the companies are hiring the people with the 2-year mechatronics degree because they have evidence of what they can do. So we have to help kids understand that the jobs are different. There's a lot of jobs in IT, a lot of jobs in building apps, a lot of jobs where you can live wherever you want to live and do what you do. And those STEM jobs are only about 5% of the jobs where you live, but those 5% of the STEM jobs generate 85% of all jobs. And Change the Equation just came out with a study 2 weeks ago. They said currently about 50% of our jobs are 50% STEM. In the next 10 years, 75% of jobs are going to be 75% STEM. So we have to give kids this opportunity. After I'd been in the classroom for 20 years, I decided when I took over science, I needed to visit schools. I would drive about 500 miles a week to visit my schools. I mean, you guys have a lot of people in a very small space. We're all really spread out. Our buses drive 250,000 miles a day, just picking kids up. When I looked at pre-K kids, we had about 6,000 kids in pre-K. And think about 3- and 4-year-olds, how many times they ask why? They were born to do STEM, but their teachers didn't know how to support them. So my team and I started supporting them. They had more money than God because they had all this federal money. I just helped them figure out how to write their plan so their training was all around STEM. And now the pre-K day in Charlotte is 50% STEM. And when those kids come in, many of them, they're at 4, are 1 year to 2 years behind. After 1 year in this program where it's hands-on, they have all kinds of ways to acquire new academic vocabulary, over 90% of them are on grade level. Okay, so this learning really works. I went to a kindergarten class. You know how people say girls don't do math? These girls didn't say I haven't had geometry. They're like, I got a triangle. Who's got the glue? And these little boys were in 2nd grade. They didn't say I haven't had physics. They said, I need a stopwatch. So the kids are excited to do this. But why does STEM matter to you kids? You can't be what you can't see. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Marian Wright Edelman of the Children's Defense Fund. You guys didn't know about these careers. I could tell by the way you were acting. I feel like it's our moral responsibility to let the kids and the parents and the teachers and the guidance counselors and everybody who's influencing them see what's out there. My little next door neighbor, she'll be 15 soon. She's lived next to me for 11 years. When she went to her 9th grade interview with her guidance counselor. The guidance counselor said, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I'm going to be an extracorporeal technologist. I'm going to work 1 day a week so I can ride my horse and play on my jet ski. And the guidance counselor called her parents, and they said her daughter had an attitude. So I had to go educate the guidance counselor that this really was a job and that, yeah, Caitlin could make $75,000 a year working 1 day a week. And so we have to let people know what's out there. But before that can happen, we have to become STEM teachers. And it wouldn't matter if you just graduated from college. Most colleges are not preparing teachers to be able to do this. You need professional development. After I won that Milk and Educator Award, I got to be on this federal commission. President Bush went to Congress, went to the National Science Foundation and said, let's stop complaining about all the jobs going to India and China. Let's figure out how to do a better job in pre-K-12 so our kids can take the jobs. So we looked at data. The National Science Foundation had spent $1 billion doing something called the Urban Systemic Initiative, and New York City was part of that, I think. Most big cities were. They spent 10 years and $1 billion trying to get secondary math and science teachers to do more hands-on stuff and more technology. And what they found, after $1 billion in 10 years, if you want to change a teacher's practice, we need 80 hours of PD over 2 years' time. 80 hours. And when I tell this to businesses, they're not surprised. If you go to work for most companies, there's a 2 to 3 year training program when you come in. Companies understand this. Just for some reason, because we've been teachers and we do whatever it takes for our kids and we've done it without the help, they just don't think we need it. If you want to change the culture, which is what we're all about in STEM, we need 160 hours of PD over 3 years' time. So if you think about the reality of the day, it can't be pulling teachers out of the classroom. We hate to miss time in our classroom. It's harder to be gone than it is to stay and teach your kids. So it can't be that way. It's got to be maybe some time in the summer, but it's got to be push-in coaching, where somebody's working with you with your kids so that you can see this works with them. How we're defining STEM is we know that there's never enough time in the day. Some new rock falls out of the sky every day. Something new you have to do. And so there's not going to be any more time. So we have to figure out how to help teachers use standards or learning targets for more than one discipline. Elementary teachers, you guys get that, but secondary, we're trained to be in our silos, so we need some help with that. We have to do hands-on inquiry. The brain research shows if you're touching things, up to 60% of your brain is involved. Particularly with our kids who are learning English as a new language, they need that opportunity to touch things and figure things out that way. We need connections to the real world. Kids have great fate meters. You guys know this. They know if you give them a problem from page 127 in the book or if you give them a real problem. And they'll respond. And if you can get kids engaged, the rigor will follow. We need links to careers. And I know the careers are going to change in the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, but we do know that whatever career they have, kids are going to need persistence, they're going to need to be creative problem solvers, they're going to need to know how to work together, and we can give them those skills. And when we talk to employers, it doesn't matter if somebody has a high school degree, a college degree, or a PhD. They say that they're missing these 21st century skills. So we have to figure out how in our daily work with our kids can we give them the opportunity to develop critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity skills. And it's not something that we pour out of our head. Like Linda was saying, they should be working hard. And so we have to help the teacher figure out how to set up a different system. We believe it has to be transdisciplinary. I taught some of the most struggling kids in our district. I also taught some of the brightest in the IB AP program, and IB's used transdisciplinary for a long time. If I'm designing a bridge, I don't say from 9 to 10 I'm doing English, and 10 to 11 I'm doing math, and 11 to 12 I'm doing science. I use all of my skills to solve a problem, and that's what we have to help our kids do. Most of you guys have access to Discovery. When you log in, it doesn't have STEM all over it, but STEM is everywhere. And we just have to help the kids and teachers and parents understand that what we're doing is everywhere. When I started this in 2008, they cut my budget in half the last 3 years I was in charge of STEM. And so I had to figure out which other ATM was open. I stalked the Title I director because after pre-K, he had the most money. I would follow him to meetings. I'd wait for him outside the bathroom. I'd wait by his car. I found out he liked German chocolate cake. I made him my grandmother's secret recipe. After about 6 months, he's like, "You're not going away, are you?" I'm like, "No," because we had spent several $100 million a year in our Title I schools, and the achievement was like this and going down. I'm like, "You spent all this money and got no results. Give me a chance." So we started with our Title I teachers. There's 109 elementaries and middles. 81 were Title I. We invited a principal team and up to 10 teachers to come for a week immersion in the summer. So they came and got a week immersion, and then they got a coach in their classroom at least one day a month for the next year. When we started, 40% of our kids were on grade level in science and math in 5th and 8th grade. And the state was about 50%. And I'll show you at the end what happened. After that first year, those Title I schools, most of them, less than 10% of the kids were on grade level in anything. After 1 year of being engaged, most of them were over 50% in reading, math, and science. In 1 year. And we were losing teachers like crazy because it's a hard job, and you start at 28,000. We started keeping our teachers. But after that first year, they publish our names in the paper as a teacher in a school, what your passing results are, and they don't say that you taught honors or regular or you taught English language learners. They just say this is your passing results. So what happened is the schools that weren't Title I looked at how well the Title I schools were doing, and they got worried. So they're like, we want what they got. And so then we used Title II money to put it in other schools. We disaggregated the data. And what we found in those classrooms is an average kid was having 2 years worth of growth when they were doing STEM. Our English language learners and our special ed kids were having 4 to 5 years worth of growth. 4 to 5 years worth of growth. So then I got money from the Title III. We had summer programs for English language learners, and they weren't really all that great. We started making them STEM, so they were better. And by the end, we were in all kinds of grade levels. We were doing all kinds of things with music, art, and drama. We knew we had to get our kids reading. Everybody has to be able to read. So one of the first things we did is we created these posters, Reading Like a Scientist. These went in secondary classrooms so that kids would understand when you're reading science, it's different than if you're reading fiction. And I taught the APIB kids who are brilliant and going to MIT and Harvard and Caltech, and they're like, why didn't somebody teach me this in second grade? So then I'm like, okay, maybe we need to make it for elementary kids. And we started with Reading Like a Scientist. Then we did Reading Like a Mathematician. Ultimately, we had Reading Like an Artist, Reading Like a Historian, reading in whatever they were doing. For elementary, we knew that we couldn't put all those words there, but we wanted to get the same thing into their minds. And we showed them how. This is a discovery asset called a skill builder. Kids click on parts of it, and it tells them things about it. It'll show arrows, how things fit together. And we could track the kids because they had their own login, and kids were going through this 4 or 5 times. Do you think they would have read the 3 pages that described this 4 or 5 times? No, but they were going through it. And we used some simple techniques you guys have probably done. I see, I know, I wonder. If we had more time, I'd have you do this, but then we'd show you this video. It has a frog in it because I love frogs. But we would have kids look at that for a couple minutes and then fill this out. What do you see? What do you know? What do you wonder? And what this does, it's a simple strategy. It could be used in any class, any grade level. But what it does is it honors the kid's background. You have kids from all over the world. You have kids from different socioeconomic levels. They have different experiences. It honors those. It gives them a way to enter into whatever learning is there. And it's not that difficult. We also knew we needed to give kids problems to solve. Because you know how you'll have good kids in class who just memorize things and follow the system, and then if you have to ask them to apply something, they don't know how? It's because we don't give them a chance. And so we've got to give kids a way to figure things out. And so here's an example of that.
Okay, here's one you can do at home. Take some smoothed out candy wrapper foil and wrap it around a thick pin. Close off one end and slip in a marble so it's free enough to move around inside. And there we have a tube. Okay, and now we're going to put our tube at the top of an inclined length of wood and let it go. Will it back hook end over end, slide down marble end first, or defy gravity and stay right where it is at the top?
Okay, so I want you to turn to somebody at your table and tell them, is it going to flip, slide, or stay? And why? Flip, slide, or stay. Physics teachers, you know, but everybody else, maybe you know. Is it going to flip, slide, or stay? Okay, I'm going to show you what it does. If you were my students, we would stop right here and we would do it. Okay, because hopefully some of you guys want to do it, but this is what it does. Now watch. It's going to explain what's going on, and I turned the sound off on purpose because if you were my students, I would give you this with 4 or 5 vocabulary words, a couple of pages to read, and say, write a script that explains why it's doing what it's doing. Okay, so see how that gives you a different way to go learn something? You would want to go read to figure out why it did what it did once you saw that, and you would want to use those new vocabulary words because you had a way to acquire that vocabulary. We need to get kids working together. Again, elementary teachers, you get this. I taught high school biology most of the time. In my research, when I was working on my PhD, I found that my kids had to learn in North Carolina, and it's pretty much the same when I was teaching the New York State Regents biology. My kids needed to learn 15 new words every 20 minutes to pass their state test. And they have to pass this to graduate. Okay? And so what I did, we had 90-minute classes. What I did is 10 minutes of every class, we did these word concepts. And the little cards have 4 concepts on each corner, and they get with a different partner every day. We had 10 minutes, and they put things together and discussed how do they connect. They could look things up at their book. They could ask me for questions. But we made time every day for them to talk about how concepts fit together because even the good kids would memorize the vocabulary words but not know what the concepts were. So you have to figure out how do you build collaboration into your routines. You have to figure out how do you use all of their capabilities. We typically say STEM, and this was a conscious choice I made. I play French horn, played my horn last Sunday at church and sang, did all the art in my classroom. You cannot be a STEM person without being creative. But I don't add the A in there because when you look at an elementary teacher across our country, most of them have 150 standards already, and now you're going to add 50 more arts. So we say you can't do it without being creative. But here's an example of a high school chemistry class, how they work together to show what they learned.
I'm matter of shape and volume. So call me solid cause my particles are fixed and arranged. More amorphous cause my melting point depends on my pattern. I do the rubber, plastic, butter change. Should I be melting from a solid to a liquid? Taking energy with particles, they move real fast. Or should I freeze so particles can chill and move slowly? Here's an ice-covered photograph. Someday, I hope to sublimate, move from a solid to gas without the liquid state, and that way I'll never evaporate, cause I'm already a fluid without a volume or shape, with particles so hard to contain.
And so when I was a teacher, I was a singing science teacher. I wrote songs and stories and games for everything that we did. And people would say, oh, that's really good, but I don't sing. Well, in today's world, you don't have to be able to sing. The teacher didn't write that song. We have over 20,000 songs in Discovery. You have access to Discovery. There's songs about almost every topic that you would possibly teach. The kids didn't write that song. The teacher assigned them things to read and a phrase of the song to illustrate. That was a one-take video called a paper slide video. And we do a lot of that to engage kids. You want them to present, and we also want them to understand that in STEM, fail means first attempt in learning. We put this up in every classroom in Charlotte, what we incorporated were stories, pre-K-12, of people who made discoveries. When I went to Finland, I met the guy who's the chief technology officer for Rovio. He's the guy who created Angry Birds. He travels the world and tells kids. He and his brother-in-law started this company, and they made games, and they got up to about 50 employees. And then they hit a plateau, and their games started losing popularity. And so they were back down to the 2 of them, a week away from going bankrupt when he finally figured out Angry Birds, and within 6 months they were billionaires. So it wasn't the first try or the 100th try, it was over 1,000 tries before they got to Angry Birds. So he likes to tell the travel people, and we need to do this for all of our kids so they understand as long as you're learning from your mistakes, you just keep going. And that's the way life goes. If we can give our kids more persistence, no matter what they want to do, they'll be more successful. We need to give them experiences. These are pictures of some kids from my church. We take them to South Carolina to build Habitat for Humanity houses over spring break because in South Carolina you can work on a construction site at 14. There's no rules for anything in South Carolina. In North Carolina you have to be 18. And when we're doing this for a week, every 10 minutes some kid will come up to me and like, Cindy, this is so cool. This is physics. This is geometry. This is algebra. I'm like, uh-huh. So we have to show kids that. And it's not always safe to put our kids on a construction site. I can't imagine you guys doing that here in New York City all that easily. So we have virtual labs. This is for middle school where kids actually get to construct a house. They pick the foundation, they pick the soil, they pick the kind of earthquake they want it to experience. And middle school boys, of course, they want to blow it up with the strongest earthquake possible. But we give the teacher everything, the rubric, the other content that goes with it. We put careers in there. Here, this is Danny Forster. He actually teaches at NYU. He's an architecture professor, and he travels the world. He's making a show right now about architecture around the world and how ancient buildings reflected the climate and the ecosystem where they lived. And so we want kids, starting even in kindergarten, if you're working with kindergartners and teaching them their colors, we're like, here's a 2-minute video clip of some scientists from RIT who worked with mathematicians and came up with 700 equations for the color blue. That's why you have that really cool TV at home. And the kindergartners are like, okay, I get that. So we have to show them what's out there. We worked on classroom arrangement. Like I said, elementary teachers, you guys get it. You know how to work in stations. When we started this work in Charlotte, we had one computer connected to the internet. We didn't have very much. We definitely didn't have one-to-one. It is not about one-to-one. Linda mentioned this. To me, STEM is about reaching every one of your kids. It's not about devices. Sometimes that even gets in the way. We need to look at brain research. I got to work with Marion Diamond, the lady who dissected Einstein's brain. And Einstein was a character. He interviewed more than 50 people because he knew everybody thought his brain was bigger, it was a different color, it had more wrinkles. People thought his brain had some strange physical sense to it. His brain was very normal. But if you look at this picture, the left side of the brain that's kind of gray, your logical sequential side, and the right side that's emotions, music, art, drama, there's those bridges in between, the corpus callosum. Most of us have 2 or 3. Einstein had 23. And so we need to look at the brain research. Ken Wesson is a current neuroscientist at Berkeley. He's the one who's just done work that said he hooked people up to PET scans and had them do all kinds of things. And he found, you know how you give kids a new video game and they'll play for 8, 10, 12 hours and they'll barely stop to go to the bathroom or eat? It's because that virtual exploration is inquiry. It's doing the same thing to their brain. So if we're in classes, and I feel bad that you guys have had to sit here. If we had more time, I would do more hands-on with you. But if we're not letting kids touch things, the maximum of their brain that can be involved is 40%. So we have to change the way we're teaching. If we had time, there's some brain exercises, and I can send this to Rudy. He can send it out to you guys so you can go through these. These are based on medical research that can help you build more of those corpus callosum so you can connect your left and right brain. We knew we needed to use out-of-school time. We started STEMtastic Saturdays. Let me show you a little bit of what this looks like. In STEMtastic Saturday, a kid comes to your school and they spend about 6 hours becoming STEM people. Okay, is it going? All right. Well, we don't really have time. Anyway, on STEM family nights, we did the same thing except for families. We give them real-world problems, and what we see in the STEM family nights, when I started these in Charlotte, my parents were underemployed or unemployed, and I would tell them about careers, and the next day they would blow up the phones at the community college because they found out about something they could go do for a semester. There's something called the iCar certification. It's a 4-week program. You know when you take your car to get it worked on, and they have to hook it up to digital machines, you can't really work on your cars at home anymore because they're all digital. The person running that machine, the American Automotive Association, went across the country and found 10% of them had training. So now you go to community college for 4 weeks. It costs $1,000. You can go to work at a car dealership, and I don't know what they would pay you in New York, but in North Carolina you start at about $40,000. So I'm much more than the $28,000 for a teacher. It's a 1-month training program, and so parents were calling and signing up for that. Another thing you need to write down is discoveryeducation.com/STEM. Everything on the site is free. And we did this. The Discovery Education has 27 channels. You probably know Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, Science Channel, all of those. We believe so firmly that if teachers see the power of this, they'll never want to teach another way. There's STEM camps. We created STEM camps for kids who finished 4th through 8th grade, so they've been used in upper elementary, middle, and high school. And we're using the Grand Engineering Challenges. If you've never heard of those, there are 15 things the National Academy of Engineering says we have to solve in the next 100 years or humans are going to become extinct. Let me show you a little bit of what camp looks like.
Discovery Education STEM Camp came about because there was a need, not just for their students, but for their teachers as well. So STEM Camp truly is this immersive summer and after-school experience to get students excited about science, technology, engineering, and math, and not just one of the 4, but this really kind of integrated approach to having them explore and learn like folks who have STEM careers do these days.
I always tell them that science and math basically make up this world and that they really need to learn about.
The real-life connections that they can make are really simple. Keeps their little lives wondering and engaged. I love how the math and the science really go together with the technology. It's a lot of hands-on stuff, and STEM kind of brings it all together in a really fun way.
Our students have to be prepared for the future. They are our future, and I think it's important that we use avenues like STEM to help create these problem solvers.
And we're running camps this summer in Orlando. We've run them in the past. They have a week one place that's just for girls in English. They have a camp that's just in Spanish, camp that's in Mandarin, camp that's in Vietnamese. When I was in Charlotte and buying camps, I was spending $10,000 a week for curriculum. We'd give this to you for free. And the plan is to add for next summer cybersecurity, food, and reverse engineering the brain. Also at that website, there's all kinds of other free resources. These are things that like 4 and 5 week units that you can go download. These are from companies that paid. That there's careers in there. There's really good learning that's tied to standards. And people are always like, how'd you pay for it? How many people here use Donors Choose? Okay, good. That's a lot of you guys. Every one of my 189 schools got at least $100,000 a year, and had one teacher in one school got $150,000, just him. And the things that get funded first are STEM, so if you've never used Donors Choose, go to that. I told you when we started, 40% of our kids were on grade level in science. After 3 years of this, we went to 84%. We went up 44 points while our state went up 5. That was in 5th and 8th grade science. In biology, we went up 35 while the state went up 10. In math, my math teachers were really skeptical, so they should have been good STEM people long before I started. They went up, they didn't trust me. The science people jumped in the deep end with me. So in math, I said, give me 1 to 2 minutes of every math lesson, 3rd grade through 10th grade. And I paid master math teachers to come in the summer. They put a discovery asset or some kind of asset with every math lesson. We have a standard pacing and alignment guide that tells teachers what topics they need to be teaching. So all we did was take 1 to 2 minutes and put a video, a song, a picture, a graph, something to give kids the reason to learn math, and that caused these changes in our math scores. And when we started, there was a 37-point gap between have and have not kids. At the end, it was 7. Because of that's when we won the Broad Award. That's the Super Bowl of Urban Education. So to wrap up, because my time is almost up here, there's a lot of reasons to do STEM. It's based on the brain research. We remember what we touch. It's all about where you can develop collaboration, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. When you're doing inquiry, you're using your creativity in a lot of ways. And STEM puts fun back in the learning. I don't know why we got away from fun and fundamentals, but we need to do STEM to put fun back in there. It also brings in parents. When we run STEM family nights, this father had been in Afghanistan, been home 2 years, and he said he struggled to connect with his son. He goes, the 3 hours of the STEM family night, they had better conversations than he'd had in the last 2 years. This mom was at one of our schools, and we were telling her that her school is going to be partnering with us, and so they were running STEM camp for free. She started crying. So I went over to see what was going on. She'd been working 2 jobs. Her daughter in the orange had told her she wanted to be a food chemist. This mom was working 2 jobs and going on 4 hours of sleep a night because she was determined to pay for her kid to go to camp. And she goes, now I can quit that job and get some sleep. Why STEM really matters. This is a picture of a kid from a middle school that my church adopted. About 8 years ago, the superintendent said, okay, Charlotte, you're the home of big churches. I need the churches to get involved in schools. And so my church adopted this school, and we've raised $1.9 million in the last 8 years for this school. This year, it's 17% homeless, 98% free and reduced lunch. Every summer, we wrote a grant, and every kid goes before 6th grade. They come to camp for 3 weeks in the summer. They do Discovery STEM camps Monday through Thursday, and on Friday, they do a field trip. Well, last summer, the teacher said, we need 3D printers. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can find. So we searched the internet, and we found a place we could get 3 for $1,500. Usually, they were $1,600 or more a piece. Anyway, they came, and there were no directions. And so David said, Cindy, are you good at putting stuff together? I'm like, absolutely not. That's not my forte. But I'm like, we have 126 graders for 3 weeks. Put it on the table and let's see what they do. I honestly thought it would take them 3 weeks to put them together. The first day, they had 2 of them together and running. The second day, they struggled, and so they called the 800 number that came on the box. They called 5 or 6 times. The third day, they used the ones they put together to make the pieces they were missing. The fourth day, the teacher sent me a 911 text. I get in my car, I drive like crazy. I thought somebody cut some body part off or something. So I get over there, and he goes, no, call this man from this company. He's driving the lady in the front office crazy. So I get the guy on the phone. I'm like, Mr. Smith, what's the problem? He goes, there is no problem. He goes, I want to hire Juan, Jose, and Maria. I'll start them at $50 an hour. I'm like, you can't hire them. They're 12. And he goes, I don't care. Do their parents drive? So what happened? These kids were from high poverty homes. They were 2 to 3 years below grade level in reading, math, and science. So they went from being those kids that everybody kind of felt sorry for to kids knowing they had skills that could get them a job making more than their parents, their teacher, or their principal would ever see. That's the power of STEM. It can't be for one select group. It can't be for the engineers, the architects, and the doctors' kids. I get to work with the National Inventors Hall of Fame. I'm the MC for their induction every year. There's about 120 people left that are still alive in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. They surveyed them. 84% of them had their idea for their invention before they were 10, before the world told them what was possible. We don't know which kid's going to figure out how to bring clean water to the world or cure cancer. And I know you have some very talented kids here. We have to figure out how to engage them. These kids are actually one of my friend's grandkids, but I use them for a diversity picture. She's from China, her husband, or she's from the Netherlands, her husband's from China. They have a son-in-law from Dominican Republic and a daughter-in-law from Ireland. But I show this picture because the National Science Foundation research says the more diverse the group solving a problem, the more robust the solution. Nobody's more diverse than New York City. You guys need to show the rest of the world how to do it. This shows you my age. I love Star Wars, but do or do not, there's no try. We have to figure this out. How do you get there? This is my email. Follow me on Twitter. Hopefully I'm going to be back and working with some of you guys. We'd love to sit down with you and help you figure out how do you move to the next level in STEM. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for having me today.